Canary by Cloud9 and 3/4. Chapter 45, The Waiting Game. That night, the school was on lockdown. In an emergency meeting, Midoriya stood as far away from the rest of Class A as he possibly could, his arms folded and gaze fixed forwards, unperturbed by the way his friends glanced at him with worried, unsure looks. Although he'd let Siren perch on his shoulder, but he didn't really feel like talking to anyone, or the bird, whilst he stewed in his thoughts. After a few hours, it was concluded that 2 members of the business course, second years, were missing. And then, following intense police activity and Mr. Aizawa having to use his quirk on the entirety of the student body, it was concluded that no more clones of Himiko Toga remained in the premises. They had snuck in using the missing students' IDs as well as their likeness, and then transformed into Midoriya and Kachan to enter Height Alliance without suspicion. The 2 students were later found, although it took a lot longer than anyone felt comfortable with, and since UA didn't let their students return to the dorms until the entire place was thoroughly searched, Midoriya found himself sitting down on the grass as the sun set, his head in his hands, with an anger that boiled skin deep, bringing tears to his eyes. But he only let one fall when the news was broken, that Eri was gone. "Hey, Canary, can I ask you a question?" asked Mirio. The older boy had found Midoriya wandering the grounds early that morning, kicking at the grass where the dew lay. He had been out for a jog, and they now walked together in what had been a comfortable silence. "You just did," Midoriya replied. Mirio laughed. "I suppose so, but another one. After this one, that is." Midoriya shrugged. "Sure. Your quirk has all sorts of capabilities. It's almost like having more than one." He shrugged again. "I suppose it can seem like that sometimes." "Yeah, exactly. So, how do you manage that?" Midoriya frowned, tearing his gaze away from the empty space before him to meet the eyes of Mirio. "What do you mean?" He laughed again, rather unsurely this time, as he scratched his head. "How do I put this into words? How do you incorporate all those different powers and styles into one?" Midoriya replied. "I don't know. It just comes naturally, I guess." "I see. Well, since I can only use one power at a time, and I'm so used to having none at all, it doesn't feel like much of a big deal," he explained, nodding to himself at the patchy answer to such a patchy question. "Why do you ask? Have you got a secret extra quirk you're not sure how to use or something?" Mirio blinked at him for a moment, stopping his drags, until he burst into a laughter far more hysterical than earlier. "Well, kind of." Midoriya had meant that as a joke, but oh well. "Really? What kind of quirk?" "Well, it's an extension of what I already know. Something I've only been able to access recently, that I'm strong enough." "Oh, okay," Midoriya said, his brow still furrowed. "Like something you've always had, but you can only use now that you've passed the threshold of a certain power level?" Yeah, I suppose that's the most obvious explanation," Mirio replied, seemingly choosing his words carefully. "So, how long have you had it?" Midoriya asked, slightly worried that he was pushing Mirio's limits, asking all these questions. "Since about the start of the year, actually. Not much longer than you've had yours," he explained as they began to walk again. "What can it do?" Mirio grinned. "You're very curious, aren't you?" I'm sorry," stammered Midoriya. "I kind of get carried away when talking about works and their capabilities. It's a great interest of mine, and hey, no, it's perfectly all right. It's just an observation." He laughed again. He did that a lot. "My quirk, well, I haven't explored all the capabilities of it yet. I've been so focused on the power that I had already that it's been kind of hard to incorporate it, but it definitely makes me faster and stronger. I've been able to make other things as permeable as me too, as long as I'm touching them." "Then why do your clothes still fall off?" "Hey, it's hard to manage. They can add some awful side effects. And you know all about quirk drawbacks." It was a welcome distraction talking about quirks. Midoriya had always been able to easily apply his mind to that subject, casting it away from everything else that plagued him. But they couldn't keep chatting forever. Soon enough, they arrived in front of Heights Alliance, where Midoriya could spy the wondering eyes of his classmates within. "Your radio show's on tonight, isn't it?" Mirio recalled with a sigh. Midoriya shook his head. The school didn't think it would be a good idea for anyone to be moving in and out of UA for a few days. Especially me. Ha, right, yeah, I forgot. Mirio remembered. Last night was a bit chaotic, wasn't it? Mirio blinked at him. It's okay to be, it's okay to feel anything in response to this, you know? But it wasn't your fault. It's no one's fault. It was completely unexpected. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have been prepared, Midoriya said insistently, glaring into the dorms, meeting the gaze of a few of the others who quickly averted their eyes nervously. No, Mirio admitted, but we can't be prepared for everything. It's strange. Yesterday I tried to teach you and your classmates how important predictions are, but it's the opposite with you. Midoriya frowned. As in, you need to learn that not everything can be predicted. The League of Villains joining up with the Shihei Haisakai for one. That's what heroes are for. To do their best to predict the outcome and then deal with what comes next, whether it was what they expected or not. He nodded. It was valiant of him to try and make Midoriya feel better about the situation, but it wasn't really working. Well, class starts pretty soon. You should go and get some breakfast. Yeah, thanks. Midoriya huffed, shoving his hands in his pockets and beginning to wander towards the doors to Heights Alliance. He didn't get far before Mirio reached out and pulled him back. That training opportunity's still open, he offered. Midoriya gave him a meek smile. I'll bear that in mind. Yeah, I had an idea about it all too. He cocked his head to one side. Really? Well, you've given me lots of quirk advice. It's only fair that I give you some in return. Mirio beamed. And it's all about predictions again. You ready? I guess. You're really good at predicting what other people will do. But remember that it goes both ways. The reason that I managed to get to you last time was because your own movements were too easy to see. Because of your music, everything you do is to a beat. I know exactly when you're going to punch or block or do anything. Midoriya blinked at him. That was a really good point. So, what do I do? Mirio grinned, a look that was a little more sinister than all his other smiles had been. Dupe your opponents into thinking all your moves are predictable, and then, at just the right moment, strike offbeat. Like just before? Yeah, exactly. It would probably be a little difficult to figure out, but if you can crack it, it could be a major advantage. Midoriya's smile wasn't so fake anymore. Yeah, thank you. You're welcome, he said, finally letting go of Midoriya's shoulders. Now, he pointed dramatically at the dorms. Bird time! Shinso had never known Midoriya to be truly frightening. It had been a few days since Eri disappeared into the blue. Ever since then, Midoriya seemed to just radiate this aura of touch me and you die. If they didn't catch up with him quick enough, he'd eat lunch by himself. Any conversations they managed to strike up ended up feeling dragged. His responses were short and snappy, like he'd really rather not be speaking to them. But what frustrated Shinso was that the only person he did seem to communicate normally with was that third-year guy Mirio, although he did seem like the type to keep pestering Midoriya until he gave in. It was Saturday evening. Midoriya had stayed behind after class at request of Mr. Aizawa, who had probably noticed the same signs as Shinso. But regardless, the class had seen this as the perfect opportunity to lug Jiro's instruments out of her room and down into the common area in a bid to start preparing for their culture festival performance, which seemed a little more appealing now that Midoriya could actually speak. Since, Magago said, reminding Midoriya of something that was beyond his reach, i.e. singing, and thus his quirk, was always the biggest downside of the idea. With that out of the window, everyone was far more enthusiastic. Shinso had been hesitant right up until Midoriya and managed to properly prove that he could use his quirk when he fought Mirio. Well, he'd used it on Eri when she was freaking out and everything, but it was kind of hard to tell if that was his quirk calming her down or if it was simply his voice. A guitar was thrust into Shinso's arms. He gave Jiro a look, which she returned with some added eyebrow action. Is this a dancing with Mina? Shinso sighed and readjusted his position on his seat, running his fingers over the strings unsurely. He had absolutely no idea what he was doing. Okay, if we're all happy on the song, she started. Wait, Shinso interjected. What's the song again? Were you even listening? She exclaimed. No, But you! Jiro sighed. Never mind, we chose something American since that's Midoriya's style. Yes, but what's the... Oh, you'll just have to find out later! She grinned in revenge. Anyway, so everyone but the music group will be doing some part of the dance, which Mina's heading. Yep! The pig-skinned girl exclaimed. I'm the master choreographer! She grinned, clearly rather happy at this arrangement. I'm going to have to do the singing, Jiro admitted nervously, but I think it would be good if a lot of us joined in on, the chorus. I'll be the only one with a microphone, so no one else will be very clearly heard, but it'll have a nice effect. Then we got Todoroki, Kirishima, Aoyama, Zero, and Araraka doing some of the special effects, Mina continued. But all of you will be having dancing parts too. Just not quite as much as the others, so no slacking. Yes, ma'am. Araraka saluted with a wide grin, rocking back and forth on her chair beside Ashley. And doing the music with me are Shinso, Yoyorozu, Tokoyami, and Kaminari, Jiro counted. But we don't have anyone doing the drums, and I don't think I'd be very good at teaching that since I'm kind of a novice myself. Hey, wait! Kaminari suddenly exclaimed, who had just won the long and hard battle of convincing Jiro that he should be on the music team. Bakugo, didn't you say you had music lessons when you were younger? Wait, what? Shinso scoffed, almost dropping the guitar. Please tell me you bumped into Midoriya. This is stupid! Bakugo groaned, turning on his heel to march upstairs as per freaking usual. Sarah was quick to solve the problem, though. I heard the drums were really hard. I bet you can actually... Oh, yeah! Bakugo retorted, sliding into the little stool set up behind the drum set and immediately proving that he was more than worth the effort of dealing with. He had to be their drum man. Shinso was already grinning at the thought of Midoriya seeing him do it up on the stage. Alright, Jiro nodded, clearly pleased by the result. All the teams are set out, so now we just need to try and sort out the times to practice without Midoriya figuring out. That was when their alarm bell, also known as siren, went off. There was a moment of silence before absolute panic. Midoriya was walking back to the drums and they had all these bulky instruments set up there for all to see. And Rebecca was now floating the various pieces of the drum kit into the open elevator. Shinso's guitar was slid underneath the sofa, and the keyboard was hidden behind the kitchen counter with Sato. And then Midoriya opened the door. He narrowed his eyes at them. Granted, they were all in rather odd positions, like in those comedy movies when someone shouts, "Everyone act natural!" and then they do anything but! Everyone staring at him probably didn't help. Thankfully, Midoriya decided not to question their insanity as he took off his shoes and cautiously went towards the stairs rather than the elevator, which was also a relief. When he was out of sight, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. He's going to figure it out eventually, whispered Agakare. There's no way we'll be able to hide what we're doing for the Culture Festival forever. I don't think he even knows what the Culture Festival is yet. Whatever, the longer we can keep it hidden, the better, concluded Jiro. And when he asks, we can just say that it'll be a surprise for him, so he's not allowed to know. Not much of a surprise, then, mumbled Kaminari. It's better than being dishonest with him, Ida insisted in his usual Ida-like fashion. But not long after, Midoriya hurried back down the stairs. He had a few books under his arm, but what caught Shinso's eye was the distinctive black cover of that notebook that Uraragata had bought him back along. The Death Note one. Shinso frowned. What are you doing with that? He asked. Midoriya paused by the door, his shoes now on, and Siren perched on his shoulder. I can ask you the same question. Shinso followed his gaze to what was sticking slightly out from under his feet. The guitar. He kicked it out of sight. No idea what you're talking about. That got a smile out of him. And a worrying one. Then right back at you. And he disappeared. Shinso leaned over the back of the sofa, watching his friend disappear from view. He had taken off at a run towards the end of the path. He sighed. Oh, someone was definitely going to die. At the end of classes that Saturday afternoon, Mr. Aizawa had asked Midoriya to stay behind after class. The thought of being quizzed pointlessly by his teacher was not particularly appealing to Midoriya. He had been looking forward to lesson-free Sunday, a time where he could do absolutely nothing at all. The idea of lying face down on his bed for the next 24 hours straight was appealing. The door swung closed behind the last dwindling member of Class 1A. Midoriya sat there at his desk, vaguely wondering if Siren had decided that Nijiri was worth the pain if it meant she gave her more food, and that was why she disappeared so eagerly. But Mr. Aizawa was still staring at him. Midoriya sighed. What? He just blinked and narrowed his eyes. Okay, this was getting rather frustrating at this point. What? I think you know what, Midoriya. No? He sighed, realizing that he'd been waving his arms about a lot, a habit picked up from excessive use of sign language. So he folded them sheepishly on his desk. You're not acting like yourself, Mr. Aizawa explained, getting to his feet and walking over to Midoriya's desk, where he crouched down beside him. And I get the feeling it's because you're angry about what happened with Eri. Midoriya hesitated, honestly, for a moment there. His mind had gone into overdrive and had considered Mr. Aizawa was about to accuse him of being a fake. All right. His mind was constantly reverting back to Toga and the other villains. What they did to Eri. He stammered. I don't know. I don't think I'm angry. He lied to himself. You are, Mr. Aizawa affirmed, but I think you're not used to the feeling. He blinked at him. Was he not used to being angry? Well, that was a rather silly concept. Of course, he'd been angry like this before. But then he thought about it a little more, and before the sports festival, well, he just hadn't lashed out at anyone for anything. He just accepted it, taking the blows that beat him down, literally and metaphorically, and let himself crumble. Ever since he'd come to UA, he'd had more and more issues with figuring out how to react in certain situations. He was fed up with just shrugging them off. Then again, maybe the increased number of incidences was just because he now had actual friends to have arguments with, and stuff like that. He must have been thinking about it for a while because Mr. Aizawa suddenly piped up again. I know the look of someone who's stewing in negative emotions like anger, regret, guilt. He explained. You have to understand that you have done everything for Eri. Without you, she never would have been rescued in the first place. Just because Toga had your blood to sneak in UA with does not put the blame on you, and neither does being absent in that moment. Midoriya started furrowing his brow as he tried to get his head round it all. I don't think that's why I'm upset, he admitted, leaning onto the table and resting his chin on his arms. I got really scared when I figured out what happened, and I ended up trying to explain to the others why Overhaul was so bad, especially to Eri. But I don't think they understood, specifically Kachan. Mr. Aizawa hesitated for a moment. This is Bakugo, correct? Midoriya nodded. So, you know him quite well. Midoriya had forgotten that it wasn't common knowledge. We grew up together. Same neighborhood, same schools. There was a look on Mr. Aizawa's face now, and Midoriya quickly realized that his teacher could soon jump to the conclusions that Shinso correctly reached way back when. But he gulped down that worry. Trying to deny that Kachan was ever a problem might just make things worse. What did Bakugo say? He eventually asked, when you were talking about Overhaul. Well, what do you know about... I've read the police reports, Midoriya. Mr. Aizawa finished for him. Not only am I your teacher, but I am on a team investigating the whereabouts of Eri and that Yakuza. Everything you've told the officials in your witness statements, I know. Midoriya gulped. He didn't know that Mr. Aizawa knew so much. It made him weirdly uncomfortable. Although it shouldn't have been much of a surprise. What did grasp his attention, though, was the mention of some kind of investigation team. How's the investigation going? Midoriya questioned carefully, sitting more upright in curiosity. We'll speak about that in a moment, his teacher insisted. What did Bakugo say? I can't quite remember, but I think I was trying to explain something about his quirk. I told him that the League and the Yakuza confronted one another, and less left than had arrived. Then Kachan asked who'd been killed, and I don't know. He seemed rather happy that there were fatalities. And then when he queried why I cared at all, he accused me of having Stockholm Syndrome, which I do not! And then I kind of ended up shouting at him, and oh my god, I shouted at Kachan! Again! Why did I...
Midoriya. Mr. Aizawa sighed, cutting him off. I know you're still not used to talking, but you do have to breathe. He blinked at him.
Right. Sorry.
It's okay to lose your temper from time to time, he said with a shrug, standing up straight again and leaning against Midoriya's desk. It happens to everyone, and I believe you had a very good reason. But despite how hard it is, bottling up all those emotions is just going to make things worse.
I'm just...
Midoriya trailed off.
I'm really scared for Eri. She must have been really confused when someone who looks and sounds like me just took her away, back to the place that frightens her so much that the very mention of Overhaul's name on the news made her explode.
Midoriya, we are going to get her out,
Mr. Aizawa insisted with a look that said, and if anyone doubts me, you're getting a fist to the face.
Do you think there's any more information that you may have forgotten to tell the police that could possibly help with finding her?
Midoriya bit his lip. I don't know, but if any of your investigation team has any questions, I'll try my best to answer them.
We've been investigating known Shie Hisekai locations to see if we can conclude which one Eri's being held at.
But the villains who got Eri weren't part of the Yakuza, Midoriya insisted. And when I left, the League and the Yakuza weren't exactly on the best of terms. Maybe some kind of alliance was sorted out after all.
You say that the place you escaped from with Eri was about an hour away by train,
Mr. Aizawa recalled.
We've mapped all the locations that could have possibly been on a route that required no switching of trains. However, not only is there more than one option, but there's a good chance that Chisaki, Overhaul, decided not to stay there in fear that he would be caught.
So, you don't know where Overhaul is at all? Frowned Midoriya. His teacher shook his head.
The Yakuza members that we've interrogated insist that Overhaul isn't in charge of their group. But the elder leader is bedridden and someone is still in control.
He probably controls them through fear, Midoriya mumbled.
That was our thought too. But, well, Midoriya, you've been speaking with Mirio a lot over the past few days, right?
Midoriya furrowed his brow. Where was he going with this? Yeah?
Well, Mirio currently has a work study at the agency of the pro hero Night Eye.
Wait, really? Midoriya bounced, leaping out of his chair for a moment before chuckling nervously and sitting back down. Sorry, he just has a really cool quirk. And he used to be All Might's sidekick.
I thought you weren't the biggest fan of All Might.
Midoriya fiddled with his fingers nervously. What gave you that idea? He simply sighed again.
Anyway, their team has been studying the Shie Hasakai since before you returned. Consequently, they are part of this investigation team I keep mentioning.
But wait! Midoriya exclaimed. Can't Sir Night use his quirk to... Mr. Aizawa waved the suggestion off.
He says the probabilities for success aren't high enough to put into action yet. He will only use it to confirm suspicions.
Midoriya pouted but decided it would be best not to argue. There had to be a good reason behind his decision.
Mirio,
continued Mr. Aizawa,
says that they would benefit from having you on board.
Midoriya's eyes grew wide. He noticed Midoriya's enthusiasm, but decided to move on regardless.
It might be some time yet until we can make a move, but if your input could speed up that time, then as long as I can keep an eye on you...
He paused, studying Midoriya's expression for a moment.
Then you can participate.
Yes! Midoriya exclaimed, leaning forwards over his desk. Yes, please! Anything! If I can help, then please, let... Master Aizawa just wandered over towards the door and opened it wide.
We're having a meeting tomorrow, 6 o'clock sharp outside the dorms. Just a warning, you won't be the only one coming.
Midoriya scurried to his feet and nodded, heart pounding. Thank you!
Get some rest.
Yes, sir! And so we left. As he walked back to the dorms, the smile on his face grew wider! But then he stopped, deep in thought. Maybe there was an extension of his quirk that could help with this. Just like Mirio said, not everything could be predicted, but Midoriya was sure that it could be prepared for regardless. He would sleep well if he practiced his quirk for a while that evening. And if he was alone, then he could attempt some powers that, well, he'd recorded as being rather out of bounds. That led him to grab his notebooks from his room, every book to do with his quirk, then run all the way back to the main building to pick some items up from Hatsumi, who questioned nothing, although Power Loader did give him a look. Well, when someone comes in to see if your prize student has a Geiger counter lying around, you're going to raise an eyebrow, especially when she does have one. Canary? Frowned Baraka. What are you doing? Are you starting a work study today? Kind of, Midoriya replied, smiling as Siren landed on his shoulder. Outside Heights Alliance at 6 o'clock the next morning, he found himself beside Uraraka, Asui, and Kirishima. Was this what Mr. Aizawa meant by not being alone? With present Mike? Questioned Asui. No, well, I will later, but not today. Kirishima gave him a look. Alright then, Cryptic. I'm off to the train station for my work study. Are you guys coming? Yeah, sure, Uraraka replied. What about you, Canary? You'll all be coming with me. That was Mr. Aizawa wandering towards them with his hands in his pockets. Mr. Aizawa? Frowned Asui. What's going on, Robert? You'll find out when we get there, but I'll be escorting you there today. He groaned like he would much rather not be doing exactly that. And so began a rather long and intense journey to wherever this meeting place was. Come to think of it, this was the first time Midoriya had been on a train since he got out. And actually, there was a pang in his throat when he realized he was going back to that very same train station, to the city he had fled from. He pulled off his headphones as they walked out of that train station, pausing and gazing around. Huh, he said, making the others stop and turn to him. This place seems familiar. His three friends came to the same conclusion as Midoriya very easily. Wait, started Uraraka. Is this where... We don't have time for this right now, Mr. Aizawa interrupted, which Midoriya was quite happy for. He didn't feel like explaining this at the moment. He'd rather keep moving, which was exactly what they did. It was dark when Midoriya had left this place with Eri. It felt like a lifetime ago now. He didn't feel scared in these streets, but that didn't stop his eyes from darting into every darkened alley they passed, recalling the expression on Overhaul's face when they last parted ways. Hey, Canary! Mirio waved the group over to him and the other two members of UA's Big Three standing outside a sleek-looking hero agency. This must be super important for us all to be here, realized Uraraka as they walked over to Nijire alongside Asui. They must have had their work study with her, meaning Kirishima must be with Amajiki, which was a rather strange combination. Midoriya knew that the three of them had started work studies, with the first day being on Friday, but he hadn't been sure who they were with. Let's get to it, Mr. Aizawa nodded. Mirio, you know your way around? Yes, sir, he saluted. Follow me. There were a lot of heroes about, big names alongside much smaller ones, but every single one of them did a double take once they saw the UA uniforms, or more specifically, Midoriya. After a few minutes of milling around, they were all led to a large meeting room on the second floor of the building. Midoriya sat down beside Mirio and Mr. Aizawa, catching the eye of none other than Naira himself at the head of the table as he took his place. Let's begin by going over the facts, the voice of the bro hero announced. Bubble Girl, if you could. Ah, yes! Exclaimed the blue-skinned sidekick standing to his left. She looked rather a lot like Aizawa, but with shorter hair and was overall smaller in stature and presence. Aizawa's voice and personality could fill a whole room with ease. Bubble Girl seemed a bit more timid to begin with and rather unsure. Midoriya didn't think Aizawa would be caught dead in an outfit similar to Bubble Girl's, though. As you all know, here at the Naira Agency, over the past month or so, we have been conducting an independent investigation into the Yakuza known as the Shie Hasakai. She continued, glancing down at the tablet in her arms as she spoke, most likely reading off the screen.
This was due to an incident involving a band of thieves called the Reservoir Dogs, but the investigation grew more serious after the return of UA hero student Canary.
She glanced over at Midoriya nervously, who made no obvious reaction.
Which gave us proof that something sinister was going on behind the scenes of this group.
She breathed a sigh of relief as the presentation moved on to the control of the other sidekick at Nine-Nine's right hand, who introduced himself as Centipeter. He clicked a button on the remote, turning on the large screen behind them. It revealed the backs of two rather familiar people, Overhaul and Dice. This picture was taken just over 2 weeks ago, Centipeter explained. It depicts the young head of Shie Hasakai, Kai Chisaki, villain named Overhaul, and a member of the League of Villains, Jin Bugaigarawa, villain named Twice. Unfortunately, they were very wary of being tailed, and we were unable to track them. But due to Canary's reports, we were able to identify that there was some conflict between the two groups that evening, resulting in 2 murders and the loss of one of the villain's arms, Atsuhiro Sako, villain named Mr. Compress. Overhaul was the one who killed a member of the League, Kenji Hikishi, villain named Magne, whilst the head of the League of Villains, Tomura Shigaraki, killed an unknown member of the Yakuza, who Overhaul used as a shield. Midoriya was painfully aware of the stairs on the back of his head as his classmates finally began to understand what he had been through.
After publicizing an arrest warrant for Chisaki after a little more time for investigation, he disappeared, and we have been able to locate him,
Bubble Girl added. The exchanging of information continued for some time. Midoriya soon realized that he was the most informed out of everyone there, excluding Night-Eye and his agency. Most of their information had come from him, anyway. They explained the issues surrounding Eri, her mysterious quirk, and what it had done for Midoriya, as well as the method by which she disappeared from UA. But then they finally got onto something that Midoriya didn't know, which was the involvement of Kirishima. As it turns out, at his work study at Fat Gum's agency with Amajiki, they had encountered a villain on Friday who had the possession of a gun, which fired bullets that rendered Amajiki's quirk useless for the rest of the day. Then, on Uraraka's and Asui's first day on the job, a different city but weirdly enough, same time, 2 giant villains used quirk-enhancing drugs. All of those drugs have been traced back in some way to Hasakai. Is that seriously all the information we have? Questioned a rather irritated-sounding Yuro across Midoriya on the long table that spanned the meeting room. Night-Eye hesitated, pushing his glasses up his nose before turning slowly to Midoriya. Canary, he began. The police were rather hasty in getting a report from the events of your disappearance. Our records say that you gave this information only 2 days after your return. Moreover, with the inability to speak an old translator for sign language present, you wrote everything down. Do you think anything could have slipped your mind? Or is there something you skipped over in your report that you may only consider now to be relevant? Midoriya frowned, trying to ignore the way people continued to stare at him. But then he remembered something about them saying that they didn't have solid evidence that Hasakai were the ones actually developing the drugs, and that it was only a promising-sounding theory. He stammered and then cleared his throat, turning to Night-Eye with a far more determined look on his face. That warehouse where the League and the Yakuza fought. When those murders happened, were you able to find it? Yes, the hero nodded. We found no bodies, but that matches the description of both Shigaraki's and Chisaki's quirks. Well, did you find the remains of any of the bullets? Night-Eye leaned forward slightly. Bullets. The quirk-destroying bullets. Midoriya gulped. He hesitated for a second. You said that Mr. Compress had an arm removed by Overhaul's quirk, but Compress's ability upon touching Overhaul should have compressed him into a Marvel-like sphere. Are you suggesting that one of these bullets stopped his quirk from acting? I'm not suggesting it, Midoriya blinked. I saw it. A little golden bullet. Did I not mention that? I thought I did. It doesn't matter now, Night-Eye insisted. What do you know about the bullets? But Midoriya's heart was beating a little faster now. No, I definitely wrote about the bullets. Do you have that report with you, by any chance? There was a moment of silence as the sidekicks exchanged glances and Night-Eye just narrowed his eyes at him. Then he looked down at the papers on his desk and shuffled through them, revealing a narrow file, which he handed over to Mirio, who passed it to Midoriya. How long ago did you receive this? Midoriya questioned as he cautiously opened it and began to flip through. Yesterday, Night-Eye answered. We only had access to incriminating information beforehand to make up a case for Overhaul and the murders. The police are very careful about what they release. We could only access information on a subject as dangerous as quirk-destroying bullets once the request was processed in time for this meeting. Midoriya turned to the last page of the booklet, but it wasn't there. No, there's a page missing. He frowned. There's definitely a... Bubblegum, who gave you the information from the police station yesterday? Ordered Night-Eye immediately. I can't remember, she insisted, but he showed me his badge, I swear. I believe you. Night-Eye nodded. I also believe that someone may have called in sick to work this morning, but they are in reality out of action for a different reason. Has the page just fallen out, or did someone purposely remove it? Questioned Bubble Girl. If so, why would someone tamper with... started Bubble Girl. To slow us down, Night-Eye interjected. But it doesn't matter how we missed it at the correct moment. Canary, tell us everything you know. Midoriya frowned. But wait! Why wasn't all this put onto the online records as soon as... It probably has, Mr. Aizawa insisted in his dreary monotone voice. But having a quirk-destroying drug out there could also destroy society as we know it. The police had to be incredibly careful with this intel, and so haven't been handing it out to any and all hero agencies who ask for it. Paper can be more secure than emails. That sour hero from earlier let out a laugh. Well, that went well for them, then, didn't it? Canary, Night-Eye repeated. Right, Midoriya nodded. The bullets were definitely used back at the warehouse. One for Magne, one for Compress, and another for Shigaraki, but they missed. He looked up from file to meet the head hero's eyes. The whole thing felt like such a stupid mistake. Where was the missing page? It was all stapled together, and, yeah, he could just see the torn corner of the final piece of paper left stubbornly behind. So someone definitely ripped it out, either on accident or by force, and the latter was seemingly more likely. Then there was Night-Eye's comment about someone from the police force probably being missing this morning. Was he implying that Toga was involved? Perhaps the villains hoped the heroes would pity Midoriya and not involve him in the case. In that situation, Midoriya would never have been able to repeat his report, and the heroes wouldn't have thought of going back to the police to double-check it, since they had the original thing here. That definitely would have slowed them down. Perhaps enough to finish their product where they had the equipment and resources and then go into hiding with Eri, never to be seen again. Afterwards, Midoriya continued, they explained that the bullets were to temporarily remove quirks and that they'd been good test subjects for them. But, I think this is in here. Yeah, the Yakuza wanted more money, probably to get enough to develop these drugs. They said that they'd give the League of Villains a few of those bullets a month in exchange for... well, me. For you, frowned Night-Eye. From what I've been able to read, you did say the possibility was there, but never explained. I suppose that information was amongst that which was missing. It was because I was such a big name at the time, Midoriya explained, heart still beating a little fast for his liking. If I was in the hands of the Yakuza, they would look impressive to provincial investors. I think the League were considering doing it too. But I escaped the day before they had planned to organize meeting up again.
That explains why Himiko, Toga, and Twice seem to be doing so much of the Yakuza's dirty work for them, realized one of the other heroes. They don't have Canary anymore, so to get access to the bullets, they've told 2 of their members to swap sides, for the time being. If they're trying to slow us down, then they're clearly trying to buy time, added Fat Gum. If we know where the girl is, then we need to strike as quickly as possible. Any later and they'll disappear, he concluded just as Midoriya had. They'll take the drugs and build an empire beyond our control. Then where is he? Questioned none other than Ryukyu. She was the number 10 hero. If this wasn't such a serious situation, Midoriya definitely would have been freaking out. It's highly likely that she remains in the Yakuza's stronghold, not far from this very location, Night-Eye explained. However, until we have evidence of this definitely being the case, we can't make our move.
He turned to send to Peter with a wave of his hand to continue the explanation. We, alongside a few of you in this room, have been investigating other areas of known Hasekai activity from across Japan. We have managed to rule out a few locations, but there are still quite a few to go. Now that you all know what is at stake, said Sir Night-Eye, folding his hands on the table before him, we can employ as many of you as possible to such other areas, in the hope of narrowing down the possibilities. We at this agency will continue to keep our eyes on the stronghold, in hopes of proving or disproving that area is there. As soon as we have the slightest bit of evidence, we'll let you know. Whilst Mr. Aizawa talked to Night-Eye a little longer, back in the meeting room, Uraraka sat with her other fellow students of UA, those in his class and the big three, outside around a small table. Well, most of them sat down. Canary was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself indistinguishably. They had all just been watching him for the past 5 minutes or so, trying to figure out what he was so deep in thought about. Eventually, Uraraka couldn't take it any longer. She rose from her chair, pushed it backwards with a loud squeaking sound that filled the empty room. Canary stopped and looked at her. She wavered for a moment before blurting out, I'm sorry! He blinked at her like he had no idea what she was talking about, even exchanging glances with the little bird on his shoulder, like she might have more of a clue. About what? For everything you've been through? She said in almost a whisper. I feel like we haven't said that enough. No one came to save you, added Sue, who seemed equally as disturbed, and she wasn't even as close a friend to Canary as Uraraka was. So much happened to you, but in the end you had to save yourself. And Airy. Robert. It's not right, insisted Kirishima, his fists clenched as he gazed down at the table with gritted teeth. Whilst we were all having fun and playing board games back at the dorms, you were running for your life! And you risked so much to get Airy out too, even though you didn't know the truth behind her and everything at the time. He paused and looked up to him. You know, you're a real hero, man. Canary seemed a little shocked by the statement. Thanks, he replied, quiet as a mouse. They all stood and sat there in silence for a little while longer, each in their own thoughts. Soon Mirio inhaled as if he were about to say something, but was quickly interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Aizawa. He walked up to them, looking at each of them in turn for a moment before resting his gaze on Canary. I'm not sure if having you on this case is a good idea, he explained. All of you. What? Canary exclaimed, and Kirishima was close behind. Uraraka fell back into her seat, shocked. But sir! You know how serious this all is, their teacher continued, and especially with you, Midoriya. We can't have you getting caught up in something like this again. But I helped! Canary insisted. I gave them more information! Sir, you can't pick me back out! I have to help Airy! I know, Mr. Aizawa said solemnly. Which is why, despite not thinking this is a good idea, I will let you participate. I know how much this means to you. Canary faltered. It looked like he'd stopped breathing for a second. He sighed, bowing his head as he murmured his thanks. For the rest of you, he added, turning to Uraraka, Tsu, and Kirishima, you do not have to continue with this if you don't want to. There is no shame in backing out. Now Uraraka was standing up again, knocking her chair even further back, almost making it topple over. After everything we've just heard, there's no way I'm backing out, sir. Sue nodded eagerly in agreement as Kirishima stood up too. If there's even the slightest chance we can help Airy, we're in! Mr. Aizawa just sighed. I thought that was what you'd say. All right, but I'm not letting you out of my sight. Do you hear me? He directed that last bit rather specifically at Canary, who balled up his fists and nodded determinedly. All right, let's head back to UA. Your work-study leaders will message you as soon as there's any development. Mirio, if you could hand over your contact details to Midoriya, it would be greatly appreciated. Of course, the older student beamed, jumping up. And don't you worry, Canary, he said, giving him a big thumbs up. Everything's going to be all right. I just know it. And Canary grinned back. As they all walked back to the train station, Uraraka found herself behind Canary. She couldn't help but think about what it might have been like all those weeks ago when he charged through these streets with Airy in his arms, wandering into this very station in the blind hope that there would be a way home for him. Airy was out there,
and she could be painstakingly close by. They couldn't save Canary. She wouldn't let Aries suffer the same fate. Now, it was just a waiting game.